Welcome to the webinar on coordinated plans. This webinar is second in our series of webinars that ODOT is doing to provide information, guidance, and support to local entities engaging in the coordinated planning process. You can find the first webinar in this series included in our coordinated planning toolbox that's available on our site for coordinated plans. You should have received a link to that toolbox in an email from us when you registered for these webinars. So please do bookmark that site as it contains much helpful and useful information that we're going to be referring to throughout the webinar. Just a few housekeeping items as we get started. You are on mute. We do this to reduce background noise because our offices can be busy places and we want people to be able to hear the webinar but not necessarily people's hold music or office doors opening and shutting, that sort of thing. But this doesn't mean that you cannot participate. Please use the chat box that is available through GoToWebinar. If you look at the box that has showed up for GoToWebinar, kind of towards the bottom, it should say chat, and you can type in a message there, and I will see that on my screen. And I will be pausing periodically and checking this box to ensure that I'm answering questions as I go. So I may not answer your question right away, but I do have places scheduled throughout the webinar to pause and ask and to have you ask questions so I can answer them. Also, we will be recording this webinar. So the webinar will be posted on our site once the recording is put into an appropriate format. So be sure to keep that in mind. This webinar, we will focus on planning committees. I'm going to start off this webinar talking about the ODOT and FTA guidance around a planning committee and let you know what the requirements are from the ODOT perspective. I will also talk about the planning committee requirement, the roles and responsibilities of members, provide some tips for documentation, and also talk about participation of older adults and people with disabilities on the planning committee. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tammy Regal. Tammy is the mobility manager at the Jackson-Vinton Community Action Incorporated. And Tammy's established a coordination advisory council in her area, and that acts as the planning committee for her local area. I asked Tammy to join us to speak about, what she has been able to do in her community, because sometimes we feel like it's better for people to learn from their peers and learn about others who have found out best practices and who have done the actual work rather than just us here at ODOT talking about what you should do. So we're very, very grateful to Tammy that she could put together a presentation and spend some time with us this afternoon, sharing what she's done and hopefully giving you all some tips and strategies as you look forward towards creating planning committees or perhaps enhancing planning committees that you have already established. Tammy's council meets regularly to discuss many issues related to coordination and transportation. The committee also serves as the planning committee for the coordinated plan. And Tammy's going to discuss her process for establishing the committee and provide you with an example of what she has done to engage stakeholders and ensure participation of older adults and people with disabilities. Tammy is providing you with a story and example and hopefully give you ideas. But please know that this is open to you and you're open to take what she does as suggestions. And as long as you're following the minimum ODOT guidance, you don't have to do things exactly the way Tammy does them. We're just hopefully providing you with examples, ideas, and best practices. You don't have to replicate exactly what she did if it doesn't work for your community. So to get started, for those of you who are not able to join us for our first webinar, I'm just going to go over briefly what coordinated plans are to make sure we're all on the same page. The official title is Locally Developed Health and Human Services Public Transit Coordinated Plans. We simply call them coordinated plans. Just to be technical for a second, ODOT does not require that any entity have a coordinated plan. However, for small urban and rural areas of Ohio, ODOT makes project selections for Section 5310, the Specialized Transportation Program. Federal transit law requires projects selected for funding under Section 5310 be included in an approved coordinated plan. Therefore, ODOT must use the coordinated plan to ensure that requested projects address identified unmet needs, and are in compliance with federal transit law and guidance. If you're located in a small urban or rural area and wish to apply for Section 5310 funding, your project must be listed in a coordinated plan. If you're located in an urban area, you must contact your Section 5310 administrating agency to learn more about the coordinated planning requirements. ODOT does not review or approve coordinated plans to determine funding eligibility for projects located in urban areas, but we are actively working with all the Section 5310 administrating agencies to ensure as much consistency between plans as possible. But they do have authority to do things a little bit differently if they choose to do so. For the remainder of this webinar, when I say required, I'm referring to the requirements that apply for entities that wish to receive Section 5310 funding that is administered by ODOT. And just so you're aware, there's a lot of helpful tools available to you. Again, if you missed our first webinar, we went over our ODOT guidance and our ODOT template during that webinar, and that webinar has been posted in its entirety onto our website. So please check that out if you feel like you've missed something important. And we also have a toolbox that is available that is filled with helpful resources for you as you engage in coordinated planning. So turning to the topic of today's webinar, we want to talk about the planning committee and who is responsible for engaging in the tasks of planning and doing the coordinated plan. Everyone in the community is ultimately responsible for the plan. The plan is really supposed to be something that belongs to the community, is implemented by the community. So it's the community's plan to own. But as for most things, there must be a leader in that community and therefore a lead agency for the coordinated plan. The lead agency is the entity that is responsible for leading the process. The lead agency will gather appropriate stakeholders, ensure compliance with ODOT and FDA requirements, and be the main point of contact on the plan for the general public and ODOT. The lead agency will also be responsible for keeping any sort of documentation required for the coordinated plan and having all of those records on file and making those records available to ODOT or to a member of the general public should they be requested. Basically, if anyone has a question about the coordinated plan and they contact ODOT, we want to be able to say, oh, here's the name and number of a person at the lead agency that you can contact to learn more about the coordinated plan in your area. And the people who get all the planning meetings together, people who really take leadership on that role for the plan. That's the lead agency. The lead agency is determined locally. ODOT doesn't make this determination. So it's completely up to the local community. And I just want to clarify as well that the local coordinated planning requirement was new about 10 years ago. And at that time, there might have been some designated lead agencies. And as things change and as the programs have evolved and changed, it might be true that in a community, the past lead agency is no longer the best fit to be the lead agency for the coordinated plan for a variety of reasons that could happen. And so it is possible for another agency to take over as the lead agency of the coordinated plan. It just has to be that everyone in that community agrees that that's the best decision and that that needs to happen. Also, ODOT does not require that the county commissioners, that any other level of government approve the decision of who the lead agency is the coordinated plan. However, I'm going to clarify that it's best practice that your county commissioners be aware and that your county commissioners agree with the decision of who the lead agency is. And in a lot of communities, that's a local determination that they've made, is that the county commissioners need to designate the lead agency and it's their job to do so. But again, that's a completely local decision about how that happens and what process you use in order to designate the lead agency. Best practice is to have your county commissioners involved and your county commissioners do that. But whatever process your local community comes up with, it's not for ODOT to say, and we don't have any firm guidance or requirements on that. And then the planning committee is made up of individuals and representatives of other agencies who are responsible for supporting the lead agency. A popular question that people ask me is if they have to establish a brand new committee just for the purposes of doing your coordinated plan. And the answer to that is no. If you already have a group of stakeholders and a group of individuals who meet regularly, who talk about transportation, and whose mission it seems to overlap nicely with the goals and purposes of coordinated planning, you can go ahead and use that committee as your planning committee. You just must ensure that all the required stakeholders are invited and are able to be a part of that committee. So the planning committee might have different names in many different communities. We just use planning committee throughout our guidance because it was easier for us to say that. You'll see with TME's group, they're called a coordinating council, I believe, is how they refer to themselves in her area. In another area, it's called the consumer advisory group. In other areas, it's the coordinated planning committee. So it really does depend on what you call the committee. And the committee could have many other purposes besides just being the coordinated planning committee. But we do need to see some sort of planning committee. We don't want you to go out and reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. But if you don't have any sort of committee that's meeting any sort of group of stakeholders to get together and start this planning process, then you will need to establish something because that is a requirement according to the guidance. And so the guidance does detail stakeholders who need to be involved in the coordinated planning process. And the following are agency stakeholders that must be provided an opportunity to participate. And this includes anything that exists in your local communities. For example, it says public transit agencies on this list. We know public transit agencies are not available throughout the entire state. So if that doesn't exist in your county or in the area that your coordinated plan covers, then obviously you're not going to meet that requirement. That requirement's not going to apply to you because they don't exist in your area. You must also provide an opportunity to participate to private transit operators, including local and intercity operators, your area agency on aging, your local county and or city government, your county board of DD, your MPO, your RPO, RTPO, your economic development office, your Center for Independent Living, your low-income housing developments, public health department, and Chamber of Commerce or any local business organization. So what does it mean to have an opportunity to participate? We know that we cannot force anyone to participate in this process, especially if they do not want Section 5310 funding. Then there's going to be a lot of agencies who just say we don't have time for this, we don't want to do this, and we get that and we understand that. However, we are requiring that you provide an opportunity for these agencies to participate. And what that means is that you invite them to be on the planning committee. So you send them a letter, you send them an invitation, you give them a call, and you say, hey, here's our planning committee schedule. Please attend and participate in the planning committee. And you let them know that they are welcome and able to participate on the planning committee if they choose to do so. Also provide them with any agency surveys. If they're too busy to participate in a planning committee and you're doing a survey of all the available resources in the community or a survey for agencies, make sure you include them in that. Again, they could refuse to participate if they choose to, but you at least made the effort of providing them with that survey. Offer an opportunity for any of their consumers to participate. So if you invite your County Board of Developmental Disabilities and for whatever reason they decide that they don't want to participate, you still should offer an opportunity for the consumers at the County Board of DD to participate. So you should still go to their sheltered workshop or to any of their community programs and advertise what you're doing and talk about the coordinated plan with their consumers. That is still something that could be done even though the agency themselves doesn't want to participate. And also invite them to review the draft plan and provide feedback. So even if they don't have time or they're too busy or for whatever other reason they don't participate in any other activities, when you have a draft plan, send that to them and provide them with opportunity to review it and to offer any comments, suggestions, or feedback, and then listen to those comments and have a discussion with the rest of the planning committee on how to incorporate those. And I am just going to show you a quick tool that is available. This is our coordinated plan toolbox on our website, and you'll see lots of helpful resources here. And under templates, we have our stakeholder contact tracking spreadsheet. So if you click on that, you'll be able to download it. And then you can open it up, and it's in Microsoft Excel. And you can just go through this document and use this to track all of your contacts with the required stakeholders. Again, this is our tool in our toolbox. You're not required to use this, but we would highly suggest that you do, because if we ever call you and ask you for documentation about whether or not you've invited agency participants, or if you've had your required stakeholders, this spreadsheet would be a really easy way to, as something to send us along with your other documentation that demonstrates your efforts and gives us that documentation that we may need at ODOT. So you would type in your agency name, the name of the representative that you invited, their email, their phone number, dates you sent the invitation, date you sent the follow-up, dates you sent any surveys, dates for any draft plans, and any notes you may have. So this is just a really a tool for you to use if you choose to use it, to keep track of what you're doing and to help you out with that documentation requirement as a lead agency. Okay. All right, now there are also other stakeholders that you may choose to invite depending on the needs of your community. These include major employers, hospitals, senior centers, or other organizations serving older adults, programs that serve individuals with disabilities, any bicycle and pedestrian organizations, any faith-based organizations that have an interest in transportation, and any schools or school boards. So, and I'm also going to show you other items in our toolkit here. We have our draft invitation letter to the planning committee, so you can download that letter. Many of you may already have this developed, but if you don't, this is just a template that we put together where it's highlighted yellow. You can change all of those to fulfill your needs to send out an invitation to people about your planning committee. We have that available for you. And then we also have on here a worksheet for identifying stakeholders. And again, these are tools that you don't have to use, but we highly suggest it. If you're looking at your planning committee and you're thinking, hey, who's missing from this committee? Who should we invite that may not necessarily be a required stakeholder according to ODOT, but would really be beneficial for our committee and for the work that we're about to do? We would suggest that you and the beginnings of your planning committee go through this worksheet together, and you just discuss what key issues that you're facing, of the issues which have an essential transportation component that varies from community to community. What are the organizations, individuals, and groups involved in work designed to address those issues? What organizations would benefit from increased transportation coordination? Which organizations would offer unique insight into transportation coordination planning? Does our planning committee reflect the diversity of our community? Who are the groups that are currently underrepresented in the planning committee? For example, minority populations, groups with a particular disability, immigrant populations, and then who are organizations or community leaders for those identified groups? So these are just some thought exercises for you and your planning committee to go through together to help you identify additional stakeholders who might not be on ODOT's required list, because each community is different, and we really do want to respect that, and we want people to really look in their community to see what's going to work best for them. So that's an exercise that you guys can go through together in order to see what other stakeholders you may want to invite. And also on that toolkit website, we have template flyers that are available for you if you want to post flyers about your meetings. And I guess I should go back to. And a final thing that is really helpful is down here under tips and instructions, hosting an accessible meeting for people with disabilities. This is a really great guide. If every time you work with older adults or individuals with disabilities, I learn a new way that I can make things a little bit better, make things a little bit easier in order to increase their participation and access to what we're doing. So this guide is very helpful for learning about new ways that you can make everything more accessible to the people that you're trying to reach. I know a common struggle for people is getting that direct engagement of older adults and people with disabilities, and this guide will help you set up really friendly meetings so that way it's easier for people to participate. So please do take a look at that as a resource as well. This resource was not produced by ODOT, but it is very helpful. So we did link to it on our page, but I want as a disclaimer to say it's not something that ODOT has produced. Okay, so just to clarify the guidance around participation of older adults and people with disabilities, both groups must be represented. You can't pick and choose, like, say, oh, we have older adults, so we don't need people with disabilities, or vice versa. And you also need to have direct representation of the older adults and people with disabilities in your planning process. Just simply having representatives of an agency that serves these populations is not enough. Best practice is to have them on your planning committee. And I want to take a second and really clarify this. It is not required that they be members of the planning committee and show up to every single planning committee meeting. When we had our guidance in our draft stage, in our draft format, we were originally thinking that we would have that be a requirement, that there be representation of older adults and people with disabilities on the planning committee and attending all the planning committee meetings. But in our discussions with our stakeholders and with lead agencies and mobility managers on our draft requirements, we learned that this would be a significant barrier and really would be a burden for a lot of our lead agencies. And so I want to highlight that it is a best practice. This is the easiest way for us at ODOT and for you to demonstrate that you have met that FTA requirement of participation, but it's not a requirement. If you do not have them on your planning committee, you will still have to demonstrate that older adults and people with disabilities have been engaged in all levels of the planning process. And there's more details about what exactly that means in our first webinar, but they do not need to be members of the planning committee. So highly, highly encouraged, but not a requirement. So, and just to clarify, what we are looking for is genuine participation of older adults and people with disabilities. What everyone wants out of this process is that if older adults and people with disabilities have opinions, they have needs, and to have those listened to and have the lead agency hear those and incorporate that feedback into the plan in a genuine fashion. That's what we're looking for, is that genuine participation where the opinions and thoughts of older adults and people with disabilities are solicited, are heard from, and are respected throughout the planning process. So as long as we can see that demonstration that that genuine participation was there, that's what we're really looking for. Okay, so we talked a lot about the lead agency, but what is the planning committee expected to do? Not every agency is going to be a lead agency. We certainly hope not. It's a lot of work for one agency. There are many individuals who may wish to receive 5310 funding or are concerned about access to transportation for their clients or their communities that may be interested in being a part of the planning committee. And so if you become a part of the planning committee, here's what you can expect. First of all, there will be meetings. Plan on attending the meetings and being an active participant. It is probably best practice to assign attending meetings to the same person on your staff if possible. So make it somebody's responsibility as their role in your organization to serve on the committee, and have that person be the same consistent presence at each meeting. Secondly, you'll be expected to share information. There are many tables full of information that the lead agency will be filling out. Again, see our first webinar and the coordinated plan template for more details about those tables. In order for them to do that, they will need the planning committee members to provide them with as accurate of information as possible. Please provide information as you have it available and be responsive when the lead agency makes a request. And in advance, if you could look at the template, which is located in that same area of the website that I was showing you earlier, and take a look at those tables and figure out, even before the lead agency asks you, what data you have available and what data you don't. That would be extremely helpful to the lead agency, and you can start preparing and knowing what they're going to ask you for. Also, many planning committee members are agency stakeholders that serve target populations, including older adults, people with disabilities, or low-income individuals. As a planning committee member, you will work with the lead agency to ensure participation of these groups. If you're already attending meetings, consider bringing a consumer with you to also be on the committee. So if you are a current county board of DD employee, or if you run a senior center, you probably know the people that you're serving pretty well. Or maybe you work in a workshop or at a community employment site, and you know of somebody who's one of your consumers that you think would be ideal to serve on the planning committee. Offer to the lead agency to say, hey, when I come to the planning committee, I'll bring these consumers with me so they can participate and they can be a part of the planning process. It would take a significant burden off of the lead agency to do that. Also, you can propose hosting meetings at your location. Not all meetings have to be at the lead agency's location. So you can allow people to come to you, and therefore they may be able to get more consumer involvement and impact if it's at your location rather than someplace else. You can also assist them by posting flyers, collecting surveys, or doing interviews at your agency. So welcoming the lead agency and the other planning committee members into your agency to help them with that data collection. You can also read and provide feedback on the plan. The lead agency will likely appreciate your help with this. So you may not only read, but you might also offer to draft a section of the plan. Maybe you have a summer intern available at your agency who can help the lead agency develop maps or other tools. Offer that as a resource and work together to complete that plan. Again, the lead agency is the leader, but that doesn't mean that they can do everything by themselves. So look for opportunities in the writing and drafting of the plan, and then when the plan is complete, be sure to read it, look at it, and offer any sort of feedback and comments about the plan. Okay, so here's where I'm going to stop for questions, because that's pretty much all of the ODOT guidance that we have around planning committees and the roles and responsibilities of planning committees. So I'm just going to give a second for questions and see if there are any, and then when I'm done with that, I'm going to be turning it over to Tammy. Okay, I'm actually not seeing any questions, so I must have been very clear in my presentation. And I'm just going to unmute people for a while, so that way I can make sure that Tammy is on, and then I will turn things over to her. So Tammy, are you on?
Yep, this is Tammy, I'm here.
Okay, great. Hold on.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I think if I can hear you, everybody else can hear you. So if I can hear you, everybody else can hear you. So, all right. So, you ready to start? Do you have the right slide up?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you guys for giving me a few minutes of your time. I just wanted to start with, when I started out, I was new in the area and people didn't really know me. So one of the things that I did was to visit a lot of the providers, the organizations in the community, and met with them, told them who I was, what the focus was with coordination in the community. And I just, visited them personally just for them to get to know me and to see what I was about. And I would ask to be invited to some of their meetings so I could present information about coordination. And eventually they would let me in after several visits, and we got to know each other, and it has really stayed strong, I think, because of that personal touch. I mailed invitation letters out after I met people and asked them to be maybe a part of our committee. Of course, I would always explain in that letter what the focus was, what the goal was, and people were pretty good about responding to that. So let's move on to the next slide there. And of course, the mission of the Planning Committee to increase the awareness of transportation, coordination options, barriers, and solutions. I do attend a lot of community events. I go where the target population is. If they're having community events, fundraisers, resource centers, things like that. I go to any meetings and things I can get invited to. I ask if I can attend and present information. I bring brochures and some promotional items to talk about what the issues and the barriers are in our community. And then once we open that discussion up and people start talking about it, then of course I always, end up saying, does anybody want to, participate in this advisory council that we have? And I usually get a few people that want to be on it, that brings information. And, we talk about the things that, the goals of finding those gaps in the services in the area, how we set goals and strategies. And so I usually get quite a few people to come in on the planning committee that way. And of course, increasing the efficiency and transportation capacity is always a topic, because when the planning committee meets, we do talk a lot about, how can we coordinate services. We have some people who don't meet the requirements of some funding sources, so we share rides. We, people who are like getting transported for medical appointments. Somebody needs to go to the grocery store and pick up a few items. We'll put them in the vehicle with them and take them back home. So those are the things we talk about in that planning committee. How can we coordinate these services? And I have a lot of different people in our committee. We have all the providers, we have human service organizations, we have consumers, a lot of people involved in this council. So we're getting every perspective in the feedback at those meetings about how we can make this better. Okay. Sorry, something came up on my screen here. That's it for that slide. Okay, the next one, the role of the committee, and I talked a little bit about that, and Danielle hit on that. I do talk to them a lot about their participation is really needed, and that they do need to participate, especially the programs who are interested in 5310 funding. I explained to them how important it is for them to participate and to be a part of this development of the coordinated plan. And so they do know that role coming into the meetings. They know that they're expected to participate. And of course, to get that, I send out reminders and emails. I send out paper letters to the people if that's what they select. I remind them several times throughout the quarter of when our meeting's coming up and some of the topics, and ask if they want to discuss anything. So that kind of keeps it current and relevant in their mind, so that they're not forgetting about that committee. But, I know everybody's busy with their own programs, but I want to keep this current in their minds. And to assure consumer participation, once again, I go to a lot of the senior housing centers, and I do group presentations there. I'll do one-on-one presentations there. I go to any of the community events. I go to day hab centers, any place that I'm going to be with the target population. And when I am there, then I talk to them about, or ask them actually, what their barriers are, how they get from one place to another. How do you get to the grocery store? How do you get to your medical appointments? Talk a lot about what's going on there and what they think might be some solutions or have some ideas. And then when they're feeding that back, that's when I, ask if they'd like to participate in the advisory council and become a member, and and bring their valuable input with them. And I do get members a lot that way, just the consumers. And of course, we have a call center too. We had it in Jackson County. Now we just brought on Benton County, so we have a 2-county call center now. And I actually get to talk directly to a lot of the consumers now. And that's when I also ask them questions about their services, how they like it, and if they have any ideas of how we can make the service better. And then also that's when I can ask them if they want to participate as a consumer on the committee. And so I do get some that way as well. And of course, once they're on the committee and everybody's there, we do talk about funding options. We have several nonprofits and for-profits on our committee. And the nonprofits, of course, are interested in, 5310 funding. Some of the for-profits are, where we also talk about possible lease options to get them part of the ODOT STP program. We talk about any grant opportunities, any foundations that are willing to invest in this coordination project in our communities. We have had some grants awarded to us through some foundations to help with transportation in the community, because we were able to give them numbers and ideas and suggestions of what's needed, and we've actually been awarded some funding for that reason. The next slide, please. And then Danielle and I talked about these other programs, the members on this committee. They all have their own programs and they do their own things, and we just kind of listed some of the things that they also do for the target population that we're also working with. So we have the programs that do nutrition programs, meal delivery, and day hab centers. We have community events that are always going on, health fairs. We all try to get to several of these. We'll have a lot of the medical facilities at these health fairs. I usually go there. We have senior centers, just a lot of different representation at these health fairs and community events, and it's for that target population. So it's a great, great avenue to meet directly with the consumers and get them involved in this coordination project. There are places who do provide transportation for shopping, medical activities, local activities. And then there's a couple times a year that there's resource centers that set up to host events for the community, and they'll offer, different food, prizes, activities, and things like that. That's for the target population, and that brings a lot of the actual consumers and the organizations that are referring organizations or transportation providers. They all come together in one place, and that has been great to share this information about the coordination project and getting people involved in that. Next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? I'm not seeing it, apparently.
All right. The one I have on the screen now is engagement of older adults and people with disabilities. It might just be taking a second to show up.
Okay, it just did come through. And I just kind of already covered this, is that I go where the target population is, or I go to meetings with human service agencies. I serve on other committees in the community that also provide services to the target population. And, I feel like if they're going to give to me, then I'm going to give back to them. And that's why I join a lot of these committees and things throughout the community, because that just gives me that good contact and that good opportunity for discussions. And when I visit the consumers personally, I either go to their homes or their centers, whatever. And that does give me an opportunity to talk about how the transportation barriers impacts them personally. And they're very open to sharing, how difficult it is sometimes for them to just get to a medical appointment, or how difficult it is to get food, or just their, shopping to meet their basic needs. And so that gives me an opportunity. And then I usually document these things. And this is what I take back to the meetings, the advisory council committee meetings, and share with everybody. And so that we can talk about what the actual consumers are saying about the transportation efforts in the community. And that's just a great way to get people involved. And that's all I have. So thank you for allowing me to share my experiences. I mean, I hope you got something out of it.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box, but if you have a question for either myself or for Tammy, please, take advantage of typing that in, or you can see on the screen. I think many of you know already where to find me here at ODOT, but I also have Tammy's information up there, so that way you can reach out to Tammy. And I did have a comment. Can you please show the last slide? Let me try to come back. All right, and a question for you, Tammy. How many are active on your planning committee?
I have sometimes anywhere from about 18 to 26 active participants from time to time. Of course, sometimes they all don't get there together, but they're pretty active.
Okay. All right. And then as for our third webinar, we're working on that right now. We are intending to have one in August. And if you have RSVP'd for that, you should be getting more details about that webinar in August. And also, this webinar will be posted on our website, and I believe all of you who have RSVP'd got a PDF of the slides. So the recording, the slides will be posted, and you should already have those in your email as well. So check that website for more details and information. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. Oh, here's a question. Tammy, you talked about taking promotional items with you when you go out to meetings. What do those look like?
We have, just from year to year, we have different things, but I usually try to pick promotional items that is beneficial to the consumers out there. So we'll do like magnifiers, ink pens, notepads. We've used letter openers. We've had rulers, cup holders, coolers, just a lot of different things and that's one of the things I do when I go to community events. I talk to the people about what they like to see when they go to health fairs and what they pick up off the tables and what they like the most. And then I use that information and pick out promotional items for our program.
And then a follow-up question, you paid for these to have a logo on them. So do you pay to have the logo put on there?
Yes, we do.
And I know this question's from Jennifer Gray, who's another mobility manager. If you are buying promotional items specifically for your mobility management program that has, like, say, the phone number to reach the mobility manager on them, you can put that in your budget for mobility management and have that be a part of your budget. That is an eligible expense. However, it has to be specifically for the mobility management project. You can't just get like coffee mugs that say Helping Hands Senior Center on them and say nothing about mobility management. They have to be specific for your mobility management project, and then you can include that in your mobility management program budget. So yeah, so her follow-up question to that is, what logo is that? So what logo do you put on your materials, Tammy?
Well, I kind of developed my own logo, so I actually have a mobility management logo that we use. It was a free service that I was able to obtain that from, and so I just designed my own, and that's what I use. And it has all the information, how to contact me, where I'm located, and that's what I use. You can see, I think I have notepads and things I could share at the next meeting or something to show you my logo.
Okay. Yeah, so, and of course you don't have to have your own fancy logo. If you did have, you know, for mobility management grant purposes, if you had the name of your organization and then the phone number on there was the phone number to reach the mobility manager, or the name of the mobility management project, that's what we're looking for. Again, the situation we're trying to avoid is that you use mobility management funds to purchase 10,000 pens, and those go out and those are distributed far and wide throughout your organization for many other purposes, but not for mobility management. That's more of an indirect expense than a direct expense. So we want to see that, like, hey, there's at least, you know, Helping Hands Senior Center mobility program, call this number. So that way we know that they're being used for your mobility management project. And you can always contact me directly if you have more specific questions about that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And I know you're all muted, but we can give a round of applause to Tammy for joining us. Thank you again. We appreciate so much you for all the work that you do in your community to increase access to mobility, but also just taking the time to share best practices with the rest of us. I really appreciate that. There's only so much I can learn sitting in my cube all day. So it's great that you're willing to share what you do and how it works in the real world. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and you're welcome.
Yep. And with that, I'll end the webinar, and feel free to reach out if you have any other additional questions. Thanks for your time, everyone.